Hello. Well, thank you for that warm welcome. And also, by the way, thank you very much for all the kind words in the previous talk. I promise I no money changed hands in the process. So my name is Daniel Roe. I'm going to be talking, I suppose, probably less talking, more live coding, an app which I hope will showcase some interesting possibilities for live apps, apps that make best use of things like WebSockets in order to have interactivity and a feeling of immediacy for what we're coding, something which I hope is going to be relevant to all of us. I'm going to be using Nuxt to do that, but hopefully what I demo should be usable for anyone in any framework. So here's my screen, and I'm going to get started with Nuxt. You can do that by clicking Get Started and finding out how to get going. You can also try Nuxt.new, which will enable you to start with a set of templates. I'm just going to grab the basic Nuxt template and start a new project like this. And I'll use PNPM because I love it. I love the offline mode, by the way. PNPM is really, really useful on an airplane or something like that. Okay, here we go. We are up and running. We have our basic project, and I'm going to run the dev server in the background. And let's just fire that up in a web browser. And out of the box, you'll see that Nuxt has a very simple welcome page. And so we could type something else, Frontend Nation. I should say, by the way, that I have VS Code auto-saving, so it will update quite quickly. It will also throw some errors if I ever type any syntax errors, which you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so what I want to do is have some kind of state that is shared. That's basically the concept behind this. I didn't really, I really struggled with what I wanted to demo, what I wanted to show. And I decided maybe we'll do some state. So if you're not familiar with Vue, by the way, you have the single file component, which has a script, a template, and even a style block where you might put some CSS at the bottom. And in this particular case, Nuxt, Vue would probably do something like this. You'd have some state, and you'd display it a little bit like this. And that is going to be in multiple locations. So that's going to be on your server. This will be initialized, and then on the client, when it hydrates, it will be initialized again. So it's not shared. We want to reduce that as much as possible. So in Nuxt, we have a use state composable, which lets us have a single state, which is initialized on the server and then passed over to the client. So it's not reinitialized there, it's shared between the server and the client. But ideally, I would like to do one better. I would like not just to have a sort of shared state between the server and the client. I want a state that's shared between every user of this app. And so I'm going to create a composable to enable me to do that. Composables I love in Vue because they let you extract logic and move them out of places where they shouldn't be. I mean, in practice, I'd probably develop it in app.vue until I was pretty sure what I was going to build and then copy it out. But for now, I'll just pull it out here. And we'll create a new shared state composable. And we'll export use shared state as a function. And just out of the box, we're going to return that. So we'll just return what we were doing before, and we'll just swap it out like this. So there we go. So it's abstracted away. And what we want to do is something like, ignore the syntax errors. So what we want to do is something like this. We'll basically get that state, but we want to populate it on the server, and we want to make it reactive on the client. So on the client, we need to sync back to the server, and on the server, we want to ensure state is up to date on initial render. And Nuxt gives us a couple of helpful utilities for that. So we have import.meta.server and import.meta.client, and we can guard our code inside those blocks. So this code will only run on the server. That code will only run on the client. So on the server, what we probably want to do is ensure we have got some state. And And I guess we could write some direct code here, but I really advise against co-locating your server code in the view part of your app. It's much better to create a dedicated server root, which is going to handle that for you. And even if you're running it on the server or the client, you shouldn't need to think about that. You can perform a fetch request to your own API route. And Nuxt on the server will make that just a function call. But it means that it works just as well on the client, and it means you're never in any doubt where the code is running. It's running on the server. You're not going to be at risk of blending your database code with your client-side rendering code, for example. So in this case, we'll create an API route, and we'll name this maybe state, and we'll have an ID so we can access it by a particular ID. And Nitro has a very straightforward syntax for API routes. So we could return, oh, I like that. We could just return an emoji like that, and we could hit our endpoint, and we should get a nice little emoji and a JSON object coming back at the other end. In this case, we're pretty simple. We want to grab the ID, and we have lots and lots. If you've not used Nitro, by the way, we have lots and lots of helpful utilities here, which are all from a framework called H3, which we use under the hood and is used in other meta frameworks as well. And so getRouterParameter just will grab from the URL, and that's what we're interested in. So if it doesn't exist, then we'll throw an error. So we have an error creation utility here, and I'll just say status 400 seems good, and thank you very much, Copilot. And so, but then if we have one, we're going to want to access our data somewhere. Now, out of the box, sort of built in, Nuxt has this concept of storage layer. And so you can tap into that at any point. In this case, we'll tap into cache state. So you can use any prefix you want and any key value set that you want in your storage. And you can mount different prefixes to different backends. So something like Redis or Mongo or even GitHub, or memory is the default, or file system or Cloudflare KV, or any number of different things. And so that should hopefully work wherever you're deploying. And it means that you have a very straightforward universal layer. So in this case, we're going to get the data. We're going to say storage, get item ID, and then we're just going to return that data, I guess. And if we hit that like this, it should come back with no content because there isn't anything there at the moment. Let's make this handle updating the data as well. So we could say if event method is put, then we are going to set some data. So this isn't quite right, Copilot, but it's close enough. So we're going to use read body to pull out the data from the body of the incoming message. And then we're going to set the item, just as straightforward as that. And we probably don't even need to return the data. We can just do this. And by the way, if you're wanting a little optimization, we also now have the new wait until. So you can actually just say, we want a direct return. And in the background, make sure that you finish that promise and don't abandon the promise somewhere and leave it unfulfilled. Okay, so this should work. I guess we should be able to fetch some data here in a GET request. And if it's a PUT request, we should be able to set some data. So that seems straightforward. Let's do that in here. So what we want to do, in this case, we can use a view function called onServerPrefetch. And that will be run before sending the response back. And it means we keep the composable synchronous, which I really recommend you always do if possible. We're going to use a $fetch utility here, which for Nuxt lets us have type-safe access to our fetch request, although this particular case probably won't be type-safe because we are directly hitting an unknown endpoint, but we'll just pass in our ID. I guess we need one. Let's make our ID something like state, just very generic, because in this case, we just have a single state object. But this would mean that this is a more useful utility that can be used in more contexts. And to make it more useful, I'm just going to add a little bit of TypeScript here, which basically says it's going to be any it's going to let you provide your own type definition of what kind of state you have, which might not be very useful right now, but it might be more useful as we build. So in this case, we're just fetching the state. I'm actually in this case just going to override the type and say I always want this to be JSON. And yeah, once we get the data, then we're going to update the state. And I'm just going to assert, I guess, that that it matches the right value. So now I think that should work still. But let's set up something to update it. So we're going to watch the state, and then we're going to have a little sync state function, I guess, which we can create. And we're going to want to do that deeply because it's going to be an object. And I'm just going to make it a post flash. So it's going to run after other effects run in view. So we'll have an async function, sync state, and that's going to take a new state value. And we're going to be able to do whatever we need here. So in this case, actually, it's pretty good. So we don't need to stringify or parse data when we're using $fetch. It's going to do it automatically for us. And this is just going to sync the data back to the server. So let's test if that works. So in our app, we're going to say, hey, this is going to have a count, which is a number. And let's just initialize it. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to set it to 0. And then I guess, yep, that's worked fine. And we're going to need, say, a button. And if you click the button, then we're going to increment the state. So, okay, it's incrementing. I'm going to hard refresh the page. Don't know if you saw that, but the count is intact now. And so actually, if I copy that and open new tab, and then maybe load them side by side, we should be able to see I can increment there and then go over here and refresh. And the state is shared between these two requests, which normally you probably don't want to do. But in some cases, like this one, we want to have a nice little live implementation. It's working. That's what we want. But, you know, we want something more than this. It's really, you want users to have to refresh, or what are you going to do? Have a little polling API that's going to hit it in the background? It'd be nice to use a WebSocket to make this, this all wire up automatically. And so what we can do is enable an experimental Nitro feature. Nitro is the server that Nuxt uses. We built it as part of building Nuxt, but it's now a totally separate thing. And so some of the server features that we basically get for free in Nuxt are coming from Nitro. So sometimes when I say Nuxt does something, it's actually Nitro that does it. And so we can enable experimental WebSocket support. And you're going to love this. So I'm going to create a new WebSocket root. It can be any root in your app, but in this case, I like the _WS convention. And we're going to define a WebSocket handler. So instead of being a normal event handler, we're going to just register some hooks. So in this case, we have some options. So we can log the closed event. We can log, say, an error event. And what else do we have? We have an open event. That's quite useful. So again, we'd want to log to say that this is opened. This is very useful when debugging, right? And then we have a message. So when there's a message that comes, we're going to log that too. So probably what we want to happen is when a message comes in, we want to update the state, and we want to send it out. So now two of Nuxt's targets, Node and Bun, have built-in support for pub/sub. So we can broadcast stuff to everyone who's connected. And so we have access in this case to a peer subscribe, state updates like that. And we can unsubscribe equally when the connection is closed. And that means what we could do is update everyone else when the new data comes in. So we can grab the same code that we had here, which was this stuff and also that, and just, let's see, copy that in here and here. And basically what we're going to want to do is get the data a little bit differently. We can't grab it from an event. We just have a message. So instead what we can do is const data is JSON parse message text. Actually, we'll pull that out, say, and parse it. So this is the new data, and we probably need to know the ID so we can set the item. So in this case, we will set it. We'll say that the message needs to have an ID and say a value. So we'll set the item like that. And then we need to update everyone else so we can do the same kind of thing. We're going to broadcast, in this case, it's called publish, state updates, and we're just going to send the exact same message in we got to everyone else. So that should do what we want. It should keep everybody in sync. So if we then update our shared state, we're now going to need to have a WebSocket and handle that. So we'll create another composable for that to abstract some logic out. So we'll do export function use WebSocket. And on the server, we will just directly return because we don't want to create a new WebSocket connection there. Otherwise, we're going to create a single WebSocket. We don't want to create it on every request. And we're going to do it like that. So if there's no WebSocket, then we are going to find what protocol we're in. So are we in a secure context or not? We're going to create a new, I love Copilot, it's just taking me all the way there. So, and that's even the right URL. So we can actually just create a new WebSocket like this. It's not complicated. And then we can return the WebSocket and also a ready promise. So we can do something like a new promise. Yeah, I would use an add event listener personally. There we go. And that is just going to mean that we can know when this WebSocket is ready to send events. So there we go. I think that's a pretty simple WebSocket composable. And we'll use that on the client. We'll say that it's definitely defined. That's what the exclamation mark is doing, because we know we're in the client context. And so what we could do here now is instead of fetching with this put request, we want to be able to send a WebSocket. So what we would do is say await the ready promise that we have got. And then we're going to send these things, the ID and the value, and we can just drop all of this stuff. So we can already see if that's going to work. So I should be able to click increment and refresh. No, it's not quite worked. What have I done here? So new state, send ID value. Oh, interesting. ID and value. And what we want to make sure is that in our server root, we have got, oh, it's not coming through. It's underscore WS. We have our WebSocket. And interesting, we're not getting any logs at all, which makes me think that maybe I am not server roots underscore WS. I'm just going to restart the WebSocket server and check what are we doing here. We're getting the message, parsing it, setting the item, and we're also logging when we receive it. So not receiving it for some reason. If anyone knows what the issue is, do feel free to comment. Okay, so we're waiting for WebSocket. Let's try console log ready. And oh, do you know, I think I know what I've done. I'm listening for ready, but it should be open. Let's try that one more time. Increment, refresh. Great. So it's still working, but it's not updating anything else. And that's because we need to add an event listener. So what we need to do is something like WS add event listener. And when we get a message coming in, we are then going to do exactly the same thing that we did. We're going to parse the data. So JSON parse event data. And then we're going to update the state. So we want to say basically state value is data value, but I'm not going to do it. And the reason why I'm not going to do it right now, oh yeah, we probably should check if the ID matches. So if data ID is ID. But I'm not going to do it because it would currently trigger pretty much, I'm sure, an infinite loop. So let's just add a little protection against that. We'll do a snapshot. And I'll use a utility called ohash, and I'll also install another thing called cloner. And we will hash our data. So we'll do hash state value. And then basically here we can say new snapshot equals hash incoming value, the data value. And then basically if new snapshot doesn't equal existing snapshot, then we're going to update it. So the snapshot is new snapshot. The state value is the new data value. So let's try that and see it's working. So basically I'm updating the state and it's being synced across tabs. That is pretty cool, isn't it? Like I never get tired of that. That's so fun. Okay, so we might want to do a little bit more, right? So in this case, I think let's make this a little prettier and more interesting. So if we open our app again, currently we're just syncing account. Let's make this genuinely multiplayer. So I'm going to install another UnJS utility. These are all part of the UnJS ecosystem, by the way. Do check it out on GitHub and also on unjs.io. You can see a lot of these utilities that we're using today. It's definitely worth checking out and using, whether or not you're using Nuxt at all, for example. And we're going to use something called uncrypto. Now, uncrypto is a wrapper around the web crypto API, which works in the browser, as well as the crypto that you'll find in your node environment, which means you can use in a single utility things that otherwise would be implemented very differently. So in this case, we can say something like me. I'm going to have a random UUID. So I'll be distinguished from other people. And we're going to change the notion of this state. So we're going to have a string key, and then we're going to have a coordinate. So we can have an X and Y value of our state. And so in this case, we have our state still. It's still refreshed at count 30. We might update it. State.value is nothing, please. Okay. So that's written back to the file system. Oh, no, it's not. I might need to do that again on the client side. Matter client. Let's just do that like that. There we go. Okay, so what I want to be able to do here is display a little SVG cursor when I move my mouse. So I'm going to go and grab that from Icons. Recommend Icons, by the way. It is an amazing library of SVG icons. I'm going to grab this one, and we'll just create a little SVG symbol. So we'll have some defs, and I'll paste the symbol in there. And then I'll reference it down here. So I'll have an SVG, and then I'll use xlink href, and that's pretty much right. That's the ID. And I'll just insert it there. So we should now see we have got a nice big mouse pointer. And so what we want to do is have one of these for everyone who is in our server. It should probably be a bit smaller. So height, say 24, that's about right. And then it should also have some attributes. So we're going to want to have it position absolute probably. And then we probably want it to have we probably want some other stuff. Okay, so our div and HTML, and I guess just our div is fine. We'll say width should be 100 width, height 100 vertical height. And then I think we can just directly assign this a value. So we'll say we're going to iterate over the state. So v for x, y in state. And so those are nicely typed because we know what it's meant to be. And so what we'll do here is just use a style binding that Vue gives us the ability to do. So we'll have a left should be X, right? And top should be Y. And I don't think there's anything to display right now because we don't have anything in state. So we need a way to update that. And so we'll create an async, or we'll create a function handle update. It's going to take an event, which is either a touch event or a mouse event. And what we're going to do is, const client X is nice. And this is where Copilot is so helpful, isn't it? Right. So this is what we want to do. And basically, if client X and client Y, what we're going to do is update the state. So let's just see if that does anything. Oh, we have to register it. So we're going to listen to mouse smooth events, say, and do it passively. All mouse related events really would be good if they're super passive. It makes it much more performant for the browser. So touch end, say, and maybe also I guess we want touch move. Okay, let's see if that's going to do anything. Yeah, okay. So we see we've got the state updated there. And yes, as I'm moving, you can see that my mouse is followed by this massive mouse pointer. And you can also see it syncing to the other screen. Tell me, that's neat, isn't it, right? That's really neat. Okay, and that's all powered by Websockets running between these two different browsers. Different tabs. And I guess it probably would work if you wanted to join as well. So let's just do one more thing. Let's create a utils folder, and I'm going to create something called a color hash. Now, I've grabbed this from in advance. Oh dear, yeah, we need to fix that. But in advance, I've grabbed this from Roland R's color hash library and just pasted it here. It had to be tidied up a little bit. And so what we're going to do is just hash these so we have a nice color as well. So color is going to be the color hash of, we have an ID, so we can color hash the ID. And is that the, oh no, it needs to be .hex. Cool. Let's see if that, yeah, they're showing up as beautiful little things, different colors of mouse. Okay, does anyone want to join? I don't know if you can, but let's just fire up ngrok. And we've got a URL, and let's just see if I can go to a QR code. There we go. Thank you, Alan Smith. Feel free to scan this QR code, or I'll paste it in the chat. And hopefully you'll be able to join. This is my dev server, so don't expect it to be super performant. Like you're receiving everything from my operating system. I see at least someone else has joined. I am hoping very much this is working. Who can say? And this may or may not work as we continue to update things. Let's see. Shared state, let's just check. Do you know, I think we also need to implement a pause function. So we can do let paused is false. And then what we want to do in this particular case is when we receive an update, we know it will immediately trigger another sync back to the server. And so we probably want to do, say, pause the updating. And then in this case, if paused, we're going to turn the pause off and respond to the next response. So that might improve things a little bit. Let's see. Okay, seems good. Anyone else joining? Anyone else able to do so? Or not? Totally possible that it might not work. Okay, let's see. We can do a few more interesting things with this. So the first thing that I want to do is we're not doing this in a very efficient way at all, because what we're doing is we are synchronizing the entire state of the app on every update. One more thing, I'm just going to turn DevTools off because I don't think that we probably need it. And it will probably make it a little bit better for so many different users coming in. Okay, so what we want to do is actually only sync the diff. Now, it would be fine if you're just making an app that syncs mouse cursors, one is unique for each user. You could probably very easily write the code to do that yourself. But I want a composable that works generically for everyone. So this morning, as I was preparing this talk and starting to think about what we would do, I came across an amazing library called Mendoza. So Mendoza is published by Sanity. They're a content management system. They're great, by the way, along with lots of other CMSs. But the Sanity Mendoza is a Go library, which basically handles creating a patch between one JSON and another. So this is an example of what that kind of diff looks like. It's a lot shorter than any kind of manual diffing, and it handles merging different diffs together. So what I've just done is made a few changes to the project. So I've changed it so it's not a CLI, but is designed to be compiled to WebAssembly and embedded in the browser. So I'm just going to build the project and copy it across into the project that we're working with. So we now have a new dozadiff.wasm file. And let's try using WebAssembly to create a more efficient diff of our state so we can sync back and forth. So we're going to export another function, use Mendoza. And so what we're going to have is, I guess, a diff function, which is the thing that we really care about. And then what we are going to do, that's going to be an async blob A, blob B, and that's going to return a promise string. So that's going to be the patch. What have I done wrong here? What am I doing? There, right. Okay. So what we're going to need to do is, again, on the server, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to directly return. But on the client, we're going to return this diff. So if diff, return diff, great. And we're going to need to initialize it. Now, there's one more thing that I'm going to need to do, another bit of magic, which I don't have time to create. But if you have a look at Go's WebAssembly implementation, they actually have some magic code for you. Is ngrok not working for folk? Apologies if that's the case. Still the same URL. I'm just going to disable it for the moment. We're going to do it again in a second, probably because this is the performance issue we're dealing with. So Go has some magical code which basically sets up an environment for Go WebAssembly to run in. And so again, I've improved that a little bit. And we have, let's see, we can have a Go function here. So I've basically just tidied it up slightly. So I moved it into modern syntax, and we have an export class Go. And so here we're going to create a new Go, which is what we need in order to handle the running of this WebAssembly. And then we're going to instantiate it. So we're going to do WebAssembly instantiate. This is great. Thank you. It's going to be dozadiff though. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run it just like that. So what this does, if you have a look at the Mendoza function, I've basically set it so that it sets a global variable called diff, which is effectively the same function that we want access to, which creates the smart diff value. So we will define diff here and basically say if, I guess we probably just have to, okay, just mark that as a promise, and then we can await it. So we can just await P. And then what we're going to want to do is say, let's see, we're going to have to convert these to strings because Go wants, we have to pass them across as strings into the WebAssembly boundary and then back again. So we're going to run window.diff JSON stringify blob A and do the same for blob B. And that's going to be, we're going to await that. and then we're going to return JSON parse results. It's going to be a very small array. And so hopefully that's going to work. I'm just going to make TypeScript happy again. So declare global interface window, and we have a global variable like this, which is expecting that, and it might be defined. So we're going to just assert that it is in this case. We can even maybe do it like this. So if not window diff, then await the promise, and then we know that it is defined because we've waited for it. Okay, I think this should do what we want. We want to return that. So I think we now should be able to run this use Mendoza function to create more efficient synced state. So we'll do const diff is use Mendoza. And then what we want to do is, instead of sending the entire value, we're just going to send a patch. So we're going to want to diff the old value. We're going to create the old value. That old state is clona state value. And we're going to need to update that as well down here. And then what we're going to want to do is diff it. So we have our old state, new state, and we'll just send the patch, not the entire state, to the WebSocket server. And we also want to handle coming back a patch as well. So we're going to need to install a utility, which is just the patch application library. That's all that is published in the JavaScript ecosystem. We're going to publish out a apply patch utility. So in this particular case, we're going to need to constitute the data. So we're going to say new state is going to be apply patch. The old state is already defined, or it could just be data.value, I guess. But and then we have, hopefully, we're going to have data patch coming in. And so then we can use that both for creating the snapshot and also instantiating the new state value. Great. So now we need to handle this in our WebSocket utility. It's going to be doing exactly the same kind of thing. So when we receive the message coming in, we're still going to publish the new data, just like that. But the only thing we need to do really is set the item with the patch applied. So we're going to want to say const new data is apply patch, and we're going to need the existing data. So we're going to grab that from, similarly, the get item like this. Existing data maybe is storage get item. The new data is applying the existing data and the data patch coming in, and hopefully then that is going to be what we're going to set to our state. Now, I have no idea if this is going to work. Let's try it. So hopefully, yeah, I've got something following me around. And on this side, I think it seems to be working fine. Now, the great thing about this is now we're not sending the entire state back and forth. We're just sending this patch, which is produced for us in WebAssembly, which is always nice. So it's nice, it's efficient, it's a tiny little library, and it means that this will work in other situations. So we can use this use shared state composable without needing to know exactly how the data changes. So I think that's a pretty cool idea. We can, by the way, drop this if import meta.server, because Nuxt automatically tree shakes on server prefetch from client code. And I think pretty much this is ready to go. Only question in my mind is I would have really liked to deploy this. I don't know if we have a huge amount of extra time. Don't know if Jen is going to pop up and say, "Hey, Daniel, stop it. You have gone for 30 minutes, and it might be time to I'm going to stop because." But I really hate it. So we can deploy this. So I'll just build it to start with. We'll just build this with a node environment. It is possible to deploy this to something like Cloudflare Pages with PartyKit running the server, which I would highly recommend. That's a pretty cool way of doing it. But just give everyone a chance to play with it. I've built the server and we're running it here. And let me see if I can generate another QR code. There we go. So if you paste that into your console, I'm very much hoping that that should work for you. I'm even going to try it on my phone. Let's see if it comes through. Hopefully I see some more. Oh, I'll close this. We have a better view of everybody. At least one more person has joined. Okay, I've joined on my phone. A few cursors are being displayed. I love it. This is great. Thank you for joining, people. Yeah. Okay, we are doing this together. This is wonderful. Websockets for the win. Websockets for the win. Okay, I love it. I really, really love it. Good stuff. Okay, I'm sure, I hope you realize there's so much more I could say. If you are interested in any of this, feel free to check out the Nuxt documentation. Also check out my website, roe.dev, because you can contact me, drop me an email. I have, by the way, if you go to roe.dev/chat, I have an open invitation. You can book a call with me at any time and schedule a 10-minute chat. If there's anything I could do to help you get started in open source, or if there's any other way I can help, I would be really delighted to do that. But that's all from me, I guess. Handing back over to Jen.
Yay, splendid, wonderful. And can we have your yay? I was like, you just switched it, so that works. Magic. All right. So give me just a second. We have so many questions. Like, it's where do we start? But they're all good questions. And it's probably one of my favorites when we get to ask them all. But also, y'all, Daniel said that if you book time with him, that he will. And it's wonderful. And he's been on my live stream before. So maybe one day I'll have like a Daniel live stream. Have you guys done that
Daniel,
yet? With you and,
what does that mean?
yeah, with you and Daniel Kelly. Like, that could be fun.
That would be so much fun.
But on the questions at hand, what are good resources to further learn further things about Nuxt or Nitro?
Good resources. So the Nuxt documentation is a good place to start. I also do regular live streams if you want to come code with me like this. I would also mention Alex Lichter does amazing videos. But honestly, once you start, there's so many great resources out there. I know that people have seen some ads for View School. I'm sure those would all be excellent resources too. There's Learn Vue, there's Mastering Nuxt, lots of places. And I would check YouTube. And I guess it's also true that you really need sometimes people to talk to. So the Nuxt Discord is great for that. For just, I don't know what I'm doing. This is what I'm trying, and someone help me out. So that's really good too. Yeah, I think those. And then if you run into a bug or something, then GitHub is the place to go. And I and others check that regularly all the time. So
perfect. All right. Will out of order streaming will come to Nuxt soon?
I would love to see out of order streaming in Nuxt. And actually, I have a branch open which is implementing streaming HTML for Nuxt. So that's yeah, I think I'd like to see that quite soon.
Yay. Is Nuxt good for SPAs too, or does it introduce a lot of overhead on top of VO?
No, so Nuxt would be a great choice for SPAs. So you can set, if you don't want something server rendered for a reason, and you might have a lot of good reasons for it, you can set SSR false in your Nuxt config, and then you basically just benefit from the developer experience. And also we have some best practices built into sort of how we handle page routing and data fetching on the client side, which you'll benefit from too. But the overhead is basically, if you don't use Nuxt features, there's no overhead added. So for example, if you don't use View Router, then View Router is not in your bundle. So everything is as close as we can, as minimal as possible in a Nuxt project. So do try it out. And the other thing you can do with Nuxt if you're building an SPA is if you have only a part of your app that you want to be SPA, you can actually specify that and use root rules in your app to say everything beginning with admin, that should be an SPA, but everything else, server render it. So if you have something like a marketing part of your site and then another part of your site which you don't care about the SEO for, you can easily have different treatment for the different bits of your site. So I would absolutely use Nuxt for an SPA.
Thank you. Can we use WebSockets when deploying on Edge? Like, do you know?
You can, absolutely. So the only thing check out CrossWS. So CrossWS is another UnJS project, which is basically WebSockets that work in a unified manner on Node, Dino, Bun, and Cloudflare workers. So that's what's being used by Nitro under the hood here. The only caveat is the pub sub thing, the idea of sending a broadcast to everyone who's listening to the WebSocket is natively supported only in Bun and Node. But I think that's coming quite soon, if I have anything to say about it, to Cloudflare. And at the moment, you would be able to use something like PartyKit if you were wanting to deploy to Cloudflare and have that kind of pub sub ability, which I would have demoed if I'd had another 5 minutes. But that would be probably the thing to use if you're using Cloudflare. But WebSockets will work fine in any of those platforms. Nitro has it under the hood. So,
yay! And why use a composable rather than just a shared state, say Pina, or the default view shared state pattern?
So the composable here is that we have quite a lot of logic that we want to do that wouldn't be suitable for say running within Pinia. I think and I'm not sure what a default shared state pattern is, but we're performing network requests, initializing WebSockets. So I'm not sure that I think a composable is able to wrap all of that logic up into a single place. So if we needed, say, to update our WebSocket implementation, which we might do if we were switching to PartyKit, then it's just in the use WebSocket utility that we would do it. If we need to change how the shared state composable itself works, we just update the use shared state. And again, none of the bits of application code need to worry about that. Yeah, so I think it's a good way to go.
Thank you. Does Nuxt forward client console.logs to the dev server?
It does. Client console. So Nuxt forwards like console logs from the server to the client. If that's what the question is asking. So basically that means that if you have like an error on your server, you'll see it in your browser console. I didn't have the browser console up for most of this stream because well, it wouldn't necessarily fit alongside both browsers, but I would normally do that all the time. And it's nice to have the dev logs coming through on client side as well.
Great, thank you. And does Nuxt have similar syntax to Next or any other JavaScript framework or libraries?
So some things are absolutely similar. So you'll find, for example, that the pages directory has very similar syntax to the old Next pages directory routing. But beyond that, things tends to be quite different. So the concept, obviously, there's differences between Vue and React. You can write JSX if you want to in Vue, and therefore in Nuxt, if that's more familiar. But things like use state in React are equivalent to something like ref in Vue, and rather than having a state in set state sort of tuple that you would get back, you would just directly set the ref's dot value, and that everything would work from that point. So Vue uses proxies to effectively make the function call for you when you set the value. In terms of I think Next, for example, you would want to have sort of link. You might use like a link component. In Nuxt, you can use a Nuxt link, so that's similar, I guess. You also set SEO metadata in Next with like elements in the page, if that might be what you've done. There are other ways, particularly recommended now, but that's a little bit different in Nuxt as well. You would set that with a composable, like use head. But again, follow up with me afterwards if you've got more questions. There's lots of surface area for differences and similarities.
For sure. Any reason to use, I never know how to say these properly. Like, do you spell it out or do you say ngrok and not untun? Like, I never know the proper way of saying it.
So I used ngrok today because untun wasn't working for me. But Cloudflare wasn't working. So it was unreliable. That's a Cloudflare D issue rather than untun issue though. Otherwise, I would have used it. So Nuxt does ship with integration under the hood, so you can do npx nuxi dev --tunnel, and it will automatically create a tunnel through the Cloudflare network. And if it were not for the hiccup in the Cloudflare network today, I would have used that because it's even more straightforward. And it generates the QR code for you in your console, which is pretty amazing.
Ooh, that is pretty cool. And that does bring up, and you may have just answered this one, but why choose Cloudflare over hosting with something like Vercel or Netlify? Is it because it does the QR code piece, or was there a different reason why in the future?
Oh, so I would want Nuxt to be equally good to be hosted anywhere to any of those platforms. So from my point of view, if the answer to the question where should you host Nuxt is anything but it depends on your needs, like if the answer is it's Nuxt and Nuxt is better on this place, then that's a bug from my point of view. We work really hard to make sure Nuxt is deployable anywhere, has as good a user experience as it can have on that platform. And we work directly with providers, whether that's Cloudflare, Vercel, Netlify, AWS, and many others, to make sure that that is true, and even zero config where we can. So the choices between providers should be, as much as possible, what you as a user want. So pricing, DX, capability, like the functionality that it exposes, but it shouldn't be based on a limitation of Nuxt. I really very strongly believe, I mean, I come from a sort of open source, I like to own my data, I like to own my code, I like to be able to move it, to be able to be portable with it. And I really very strongly think that that is the right way to go. So I don't think there's any one answer in terms of the best place to deploy Nuxt.
Fair
And long
enough.
may that be so, right?
Fair enough. All right. What's one of the features of Nuxt that you think is most exciting that you don't see many other frameworks doing?
Ooh, there's a lot to say. I mean, I love all the stuff that's happening in Nitro, and I'm delighted to see more frameworks adopting it. So I'm glad to see people sort of joining in with that. And I think a lot of what we are able to do with Nuxt is, or some of it is powered by that. So, what would you do with a framework if you had this great integration with, like, deep integration with your deployment provider, this deep implementation with your server? And so we've been able to ship interesting things along those lines. So, and so, for the person asking about streaming, for example, it's the kind of thing that we can implement. I think there's a very strong focus on trying out interesting things, and a very strong focus on stability, partly because we know the pain of the migration from 2 to 3. So we're working really hard to make sure things stay stable for people. So our investment in our ecosystem CI and our experimenting with new features, but behind flags. This only works because people in the community test it and are equally invested in making sure things work well. But I think those are some things that I would definitely point to.
Okay. And a last question is, and I do feel like this could probably be on any of them, but what are some performance optimization techniques you use when building a Nuxt app on Cloudflare?
Some performance optimization techniques. So I think probably I would the techniques I would use would probably be use the primitives of your platform. So with something like unstorage, you can choose a KV store that is native. So you could choose the Cloudflare KV one. On Vercel, you could use their KV store, and Netlify has one similar in AWS. Like I would choose the native KV store. That's going to make it faster and allow you to opt into the platform performance optimizations. In general, I would try and avoid running lots of fetches, for example, in your server render, because you can find that however fast your cold start, if you're performing a waterfall of 10 requests to backend APIs, that's problematic. And so I would say use Nitro server handlers, API routes, to wrap those requests, and you can basically use a stale while revalidate strategy to make them almost instant, and so you can get up-to-date data that is basically non-blocking, and it's just directly coming back from the response. So that's something I would do. It's difficult to say. I mean, you can check out some of the repos I've built. So stuff like my own website is public, page.speed.dev, first commit.is. There's elk.zone. So there's some stuff out there that's sort of public next project deployed to different places. So all of those are deployed to Vercel, Microsoft Azure, Netlify, those three particular, and Vercel again for first commit. So those projects would be usable in, you could look at that for performance optimizations, and hopefully I've done a good job. And test page-speed.dev, you can check your page speed. So you can check my own websites and tell me whether I live up to my promises.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Daniel, so much for your time today. We always appreciate it.
Not at all. And just want to say, I will push this up to my own GitHub. That will be on Daniel Roe /frontend-nation-2024 if anyone wants to follow up. I saw a question.
Yay. Perfect. Thank you so much.